Alright, here we are in Mixcraft 9 Pro Studio, and I've got a project here where I've duplicated every track in it and put them inside these two submix tracks with an accompanying reverb for the drums for those submixes. And here in this first one I call it High Dollar because this is the one that uses all of the paid plugins, such as plugins from Waves and FabFilter, PSP, and companies like that. In the $0 submix, we use all free plugins. Modern, Dead Duck, Epic Verb, things like that. And the goal here was to try to get the $0 mix to sound just as good as the high dollar mix. So let's play a little bit of the high dollar mix for you. Okay, so note the clarity. Now here's some vocal.
We're standing in the line, watching from behind at the grocery store. A sour like a night and all
vocals stand out nice and clear.
While bringing up some cigs, that's when I noticed that she turned around and smiled. No, not a 7 or 11.
Okay, so making note of that and how it sounded, let's go to the $0 version. Okay, nice and clear. The mix may be a little bit different because I had to remix the second version as I added plugins and removed the old ones. Here are the vocals.
We're standing in the line, watching from behind at the grocery store. A sour.
And those vocals sit out front a little further, a little more. So maybe we'll just kind of pull those down a little bit.
We're standing in the line, watching from behind at the grocery store. A sour.
Okay, so now those two sound fairly similar. The mix aside, again, the quality is very similar between the two. So let's take a look at what we used here in the high dollar. Let me save that. Okay, so the first thing I want to bring up is I treat these submixes as if they were the master track, as if I was doing a single project. So we've got the Schoeps Omni-Channel. It's a channel strip from Waves, and obviously it's comprehensive and full of all kinds of neat stuff. What I used on this is a little bit of the saturation in the preamp, and a little bit of the EQ, not much. Everything else I just left alone because I had compressed and everything elsewhere in the project, and I have a master compressor right there. Okay, so to get the same type of result from the $0 version, let me bring my mixer over here. I just used the built-in mixer with Mixcraft 9, and we've got a drive knob. So I pulled down the gain a little bit and turned up the drive a little, and that got me the same saturation that I was hearing from the Waves plugin. And then, of course, you've got your parametric equalizer here in Mixcraft. That's awesome. It's very comprehensive. So I've gotten the same thing, the same result, without spending any more money. Okay. The next thing we've got is a mastering multi-band compressor. And I love this compressor. This is from FabFilter. It's called the Pro MB. And if I turn this on and off, you're going to hear a huge difference. Let's start with it off. Okay, night and day. Now we will do the $0, and what I put on here was this, and I'm going to call it Sorcery, even though that S is a 5. It's also a multi-band mastering compressor. It doesn't have the graphic interface that the FabFilter does, but for free, this is the best one I've ever found. So we'll take a listen. Very similar results for free. Alright, so we're going to go down through the list of each track and what plugins are on it. And we'll start by expanding this and go to the drum kit. And on my drum sub, I've got the solid bus compressor. And it's doing just a little bit of smoothing out. Not a lot, but it helps smooth out the drums if there's a hard hit or something that's louder than everything else. Okay, so down here on the kick drum, to get that tone, I'm using the FabFilter Pro C2, which is my favorite compressor. The Waves GEQ Classic, and the FabFilter Pro Q, which is a parametric equalizer to pull out a bad frequency here. And that's the kick drum sound. Okay, for our snare, basically the only thing I'm using on the snare is reverb and compression, because being that I'm using Superior Drummer, the drums are already equalized, they already sound great. So I just like to have a little bit of snap on the snare, so I use a pretty tight and aggressive compressor with an open attack, anywhere from 5 to 10 milliseconds. You get that snap from that. And down here on the toms, and where's a point where we hit some toms? Right here. I'm just using a gate. If the gate wasn't there, the drum would ring. You hear that? Okay. And the same thing for the floor tom. Would also ring if that wasn't there. Nothing on the hi-hat. Some overheads. We've got a nice Waves compressor, and I like this compressor. It works great. It's kind of squashing those cymbals. That's a room mic. So it's kind of smoothing all that out. Same thing here. Okay, that's about it for the drums, without going into too much detail. And for the guitars, my signature bass tone, which that sounds just like my real amp, the Ampeg SVT4 Pro. Okay, so for this bass tone, I use the Studio Devil VBA Pro, and of course the FabFilter compressor, because I feel that compression is one of the most important aspects of a bass tone. And here we've got a gate, because there's a lot of starts and stops, kind of a staccato thing with the bass in this song, and I want the silence between notes. And that part is down here. Okay, let's move on to the left guitar, my bandmate Tim. Now he doesn't like virtual amps, doesn't like virtual anything, wants to record his actual guitar amp with an actual mic. So there's no virtual amp on here, we're just using the compressor to smooth it out. And the gate as well for the staccato type parts. And then a reverb. And that's it for that guitar. The other guitar, let's go to a spot where it's okay. So this guitar player in the band, Brad, he recorded directly into the computer, and we're using Amplitude with a couple of pedals. I guess there's only one pedal here, graphic EQ, but there's that tone from that. And then of course a compressor, so we're using the R compressor stereo from Waves. Smooth out that guitar signal, and this is a pretty cool reverb plugin, the RVB 500. It's got some nice classic channel strip kind of controls to it, and it sounds good. Okay, and then the guitar solo, we're also using the same setup with Amplitude, and I think I added the pedal here. Yeah, a little more distortion for the guitar solo. A Waves H reverb, and then we have the Waves delay, H delay, and then this is called Stereo Savage. It's a stereo widening plugin. Hopefully you can hear that stereo width in the video. Okay, so there's your guitars. Now down here in the vocal submix, and I think for the most part, yeah, the only thing I use down here are some heavy EQing, because this is supposed to be like a bullhorn type of sound. And this is the female singer doing the harmonies, so I kind of compressed her a lot more so the harmonies wouldn't stand out front, and I'd have complete control over how those sat behind the main vocal. So on the vocal here, I've got a parametric equalizer from Waves, the HEQ, and I pull out all the lows so you're not getting the pops from the P's, and maybe he's dancing around while he's singing and the floor is thumping. You don't want any of that in your microphone. And of course the Pro C2. And then we have the FabFilter Pro DS, and this is an awesome de-esser.
She's so much more than just a lady. When your self-esteem is getting low, but she'll do when all you need is mating. Everything was looking fine.
Okay, you can see that thing pulling down all the S's, and it's very controllable. I absolutely love that de-esser. And here, of course, the Pro R, which is our reverb for the track. And then this is kind of my old faithful here. I've had this for so many years. This is from a company called PSP Audioware, and this is called Pseudo Stereo, and it's a stereo width tool, just like that Stereo Savage. And it's very easy to use. I always load it up and choose overheads 1 or 2, and it will separate the vocals and make them a lot wider.
My little butterface. She's so much more than just a lady. When your self-esteem is getting low.
Hopefully you can hear that. So down here for that bullhorn type of sound, I just used one of the Waves EQs and pulled basically everything out except for an annoying high mid to give you that bullhorn type of sound. And of course we're going to squash it with the Pro C. And again with her vocals down here.
But she'll do when all you need is mating.
Okay, squash the crap out of her too. And that's about it, other than I used the drum reverb here. IQ Reverb from a company called Hoffa. And this is a really cool plugin. I mean, you can move that around and you visualize your reverb. You know, the longer I make this, the longer the reverb is, etc. It's a pretty crazy plugin. But in the end, it gives you reverb like any other reverb. Okay, so now we're going to go into the $0. submix. And start here with the drums. Use the modern compressor for the drum sub, basically doing the same thing that the solid bus compressor did for the drum mix up here. Just barely compressing a little bit, just for a little bit of extra smoothness and punch. So let's expand the drums. Now here in the kick, we've got the modern compressor, which is free, the Acoustica 31 band, which comes with Mixcraft Pro Studio 9. Can't beat that. That's an awesome plugin. And then the TDR Nova, which is a free parametric equalizer, also awesome. I don't know why he doesn't charge for this plugin. And then here on the snare, using the Dead Duck compressor, which works great. Gives that nice snap that I'm looking for the snare drum. Now here on the toms, I like to use a gate because the toms ring in Superior Drummer on the particular kit that I'm using, and I like to get rid of that ring, fade it out sooner than it does naturally. The modern compressor, and again the Acoustica 31 band. And then here on the floor toms, the gate again. And that's basically it for the drums. So let's move down to guitars. We'll solo that one. Now here on the bass, and I'm particular about bass because I played it and I'm the bassist in the band, I think I came up with a pretty good sound. It's pretty similar to using the VBA Pro, which again is I'm trying to model my real life Ampeg SVT4 Pro. I like that little bit of distortion in my bass. So here's what I did first. Put compression on it. And it's pretty heavy compression, and what this does is it evens out the signal going into the amp itself, so that your E string is not louder than your G string, that kind of thing, which is a problem for a lot of bass players. And then this little gem I found online, it's like a little pedal that instantly makes this entire thing sound like an SVT. So that right there is kind of the key to this free bass mix. And then beyond that, I used the TB Parametric, which comes with Mixcraft Pro Studio, and EQ'd it a little further than it was, and then again I compress it on its way out. So we'll make dang sure that every note is the same velocity or loudness as every other note. Okay, so down here to Tim's guitar, where Tim doesn't like to use anything virtual. So basically his sound is going to be the same. We're just going to compress it a little bit, pretty heavily I guess, and then use some reverb. And this time I used Epic Verb. And I will hopefully remember to link all these things in the description of the video. Brad's guitar, he was using Amplitube, and now he's going to use Shred, which again comes with Mixcraft. And this, even though I've got tons of high dollar amp modeling plugins, I still use this one most. It's a great sounding guitar plugin. Dead Duck compressor with Shred and Epic Verb. And it sounds great. And down here on the solo, again we're using Shred for the guitar solo with lots of distortion. Epic Verb, and you know there's reverb right here in Shred. It's just I find the interface a little bit cumbersome to use, and I'm used to the plugins, so I like to use the plugins. And the Dead Duck delay. And this a stereo widener that's free. So there's your solo. Then we'll move on to the vocal submix. Now under here, we've got a few child tracks with different vocal parts on them. And we have our main vocal, which is a guy named Dan. And then we have a second vocal, which is a harmony, and her name is Terry. Then we've got this, which is a bullhorn type of section. So let's solo this. Go to a part where he's talking, I guess.
2 a.m. looking
Okay, so
for
again
a
I
dish.
use the TDR Nova.
2 a.m. looking for a dish. After drinking like a fish at the club I boast, I spy the karaoke house. Mine is the judgment that I dread, 'cause I never went to bed with an ugly guy, but walk with quite a few.
Okay, so we've got the dead duck compressor, which is doing a great job. You can see the little middle line
2
right there
a.m.
squashing.
looking-
And that'll change when you move your threshold and your ratio up and down.
2
This
a.m. looking
is
for a
about
dish.
the only useful de-esser I could find, and it's really not that aggressive. It does not do as good a job as the Pro DS from FabFilter, but it is what it is.
2 a.m. looking
It
for a
does
dish. After drinking
squash
like
down the highs somewhat. And here we've got the Dead Duck reverb I used. They've got a whole suite of Dead Duck plugins, and they work great and they never cause an issue. They're just not the prettiest.
2 a.m. looking
And then again our wider
2
plugin here.
a.m. looking for
And down here for the bullhorn type of sound, I just used the TDR Nova and basically got rid of every frequency except for an annoying high mid.
much more than just a lady.
And then here,
Self-
and here with Terry, we just used the Dead Duck compressor.
She's so much more than just a lady.
And then for our drum reverb that's on the snare and toms of the drum set, I just used the free Epic Verb. Okay, so I'll play a little bit of the first one, the high dollar.
2 a.m. looking for a dish. After drinking like a fish at the club I boast, I spy the karaoke house. Mine is the judgment that I dread, 'cause I never went to bed with another guy, but walk with quite a few. Oh, she's not the Ritz or Bellagio, but she'll leave the light on for you. Great for a midnight massagio. Woke up in the morning, tried to hit her with my shoe, yeah. She's so much more than just a lady. When your self-esteem is getting low, but she'll do when all you need is waiting. Everything was looking fine. Mobile to me.
And then we'll play a little bit of the $0 version.
She's so much more than just a lady. It's selfish, don't let her blame. She's too stuck on entertaining. Everything was looking fine. But a face 2 a.m. looking for a dish. After drinking like a fish at the club I boast, I spy the karaoke house. Mine is the judgment that I dread, 'cause I never went to bed with another guy, but walk with quite a few. Oh, she's not the Ritz or Bellagio, but she'll leave the light on for you. Great for a midnight massagio. Woke up in the morning, tried to hit her with my shoe, yeah.
And there you have it. My opinion is that you can usually find a free plugin to do the job, but not always, as in the case of the de-esser. And as you can tell by listening to this, basically the quality is just as good with the free plugins as it is with the high dollar ones. Happy mixing. Peace.